we are here with Bill Rogers, and I'm so excited to be able to ask you some questions because you've been with Pokemon since 2006.
That's correct.
And some of you guys will probably know some of the favorite kind of characters that you're here, but I'm going to start off first with because you voiced Brock, as well as many Pokemon. But do they give you direction on the tone of like the Pokemon? Let's focus on the Pokemon characters you voice first, and then we'll move on to our friend Dr. Brock. But do they give you direction, say like with Lucario, like ooh, Lucario's sad, Lucario's angry? Do you have to do many different versions of the Lucario voice in one kind of filming?
Well, the way it works with Pokemon specifically is that it's an anime. So it starts off in Japan and then it comes to America and we dub it in English. So we have two different styles. He was very upset. He was like, "That's it." Our daughter, sorry, she's very upset. She's like, "I don't want to know about the process. Don't pull back the curtain." But so there's two different styles of voice acting for animation. One is dubbing, which is what we do with Pokemon, and then another thing is called pre-dub, where we record first. So I'd also worked on the Transformers War for Cybertron series on Netflix, and with that, we went in and we recorded, and then the animators made the animation based on our performances. I've also worked on a couple different franchises like that. Pokemon is very specifically dubbed from Japanese, so when we get it, it's already done in Japan, and then we have to basically perform an English language version of the show. So we have to keep in the style of what's going on, but we're under the constraints of what's already happening. So when you see Brock sad, you kind of know he is. But yeah, I will absolutely. Lisa Ortiz has been our director for years, and she's very good at getting subtleties and nuances and performances that Brock is very upset right now. How upset should he be is something that the director will steer us in the direction of. And it's the same with the creatures as well, because a lot of people are like, I don't understand when you record on Pokemon, like if you're the voice of Sableye, because you just Sableye, and that's it, right? It's just you could just record that and drop it in it. And, sometimes he's sad, sometimes he's happy, sometimes he's devious, and so we have a lot of different sounds for that. And so every time you hear a Pokemon reaction in the show, we recorded every single one. It's not like they're copying and pasting. So that's great for us because we can continue to work. And especially because about 2 years ago we started up with Pokemon Horizons, the new series. And so Ash won the World Tournament.
Spoilers.
If you haven't seen it, it's been 2 years. Catch up, everybody. But he did one last adventure with Ash, Misty, and Brock. We did like an 11 episode run where we kind of just met up with old friends and then said our goodbyes. And when the new series started, I'm still the voice. I voice over 70 different creatures in the show. So they were like, well, now with Reed and Roy and Liko, and they're the team Bolt Tacklers, they've got their flying airship, and you've got Metagross, Elekid, Muck, and Nosepass. Those are all Pokemon that I voice, so I'm in the show. And then it's like, oh, there's a Sudowoodo in this episode, or oh, here's another Sableye. Or we had one episode where we had Galarian Weezing, and there was a whole fleet of them. There was just dozens of them. They pissed off a bunch of Galarian Weezings, and they were all attacking. So I had to do each one of those as well. And it's weird because when I took over in 2006, I'd taken over as the voice of Coffee and Wheezing because I didn't originate the original 150. When I came in, we were in Battle Frontier. So when we were doing stuff as we were going along, we were like, okay, for the original 150, I've taken over for Dabra, Alakazam, and Coughing and Wheezing, and Magnemite, and Magneton. And so when Magnezone was introduced years later, they were like, hey, where do we go with this? And so that was a voice I got to create. To do that, create a voice for Magnezone. Whereas I was doing a sound alike for Magnemite and Magneton. And it was the same thing with coughing and wheezing. It sounded like then when they were like, well, it's Galarian wheezing. So we need to do something a little different. And it's unfortunate Mark Thompson couldn't be with us this weekend. He was going to be a guest here as well because he's another one that does a lot of creatures in the show. And he was the voice of Farfetch, but then when they did Surfetched, he did a different thing. And so he went from like Farfetch to like Farfetch. He's got like a very crusty sound to him. And so then Lisa was like, well, we have wheezing. It's just wheezing. But it's like, what is he going to sound like when he's got a stovetop hat and he looks very like a very stodgy old man, very angry. So that became, and he just became very angry all the time. He was just kind of floating around being very upset about everything in general. And of course, they run into a nest of them, so it's just a bunch of. They're all like just really, really angry at the team. So yeah, it's always an adventure. And over the 20 years that I've worked on the show, as I said, I've voiced 70 different creatures, and sometimes it's like, oh, there's a pine cone. It's it drops out of the tree and explodes, and that's the end of it. But then I've gone through arcs with Chimchar and Monferno and Infernape, where we've gone through the evolutionary chain of it, hundreds of episodes through that story arc, and so some of them more often than others.
Thank you. And there's a few questions I have building up on that. But no, you're good. It's brilliant because with thinking of the wheezing example and then adapting for Galarian wheezing, what is that process like for you in the booth of exploring those voices? Is it you and Lisa working really closely together in trying out and exploring from a creative standpoint? Like what it sounds like. How long did it take you to find that grumpy old man voice for Galarian wheezing?
Well, we have to work pretty quickly with the projects. I go on for a couple hours each week to work on the show, so we try to get everything done that we can at that point. Sometimes I have to go in multiple times, but with that, I think we nailed it down probably within the first hour of working on it. We were like, okay, this is where he's going to go. This is what we're going to do with it. One of the more recent ones that was a little tricky for me was Garganacl. And I just was like, I don't know what to do because I'm so many large Pokemon, and I was like, I want him to sound like slightly different. And we were looking at it and working on it, and we realized that he's just this giant salt like Pokemon. He's just like a tower of salt blocks. Because I mean, come on, there's over 1,000 Pokemon. We're starting to run out of ideas.
We have keys, now we have saltness.
We have keys, we have ice cream cones, we have gears, we have a giant salt lick. It's bear with us. But yeah, with that, what Lisa was trying to like, she like, can you do something that's a little more. It's got to be slow because he moves very very slowly. And she's like, it's almost like these like tectonic plates just kind of slowly sliding along. I was like, ooh, that's a really good idea. So I did a thing where my jaw was kind of tight and did like a and it's very slow and methodical, and it just sounds like plates sliding on other plates. So he's very slow moving. He never does any kind of fast attack. Garganacl does quick attack. I don't know how I would do that because we've already established that he moves at a snail's pace. But yeah, it's a process, and yeah, I'm grateful to the directors that I work with as much as I am. I can't take all the credit myself. It really is a collaborative process. Um, there is another director that I work with, all the directors of the show, Felicia Geel, who's another voice actress. And when I did my first session with her, she was like, "Well, you know what you're doing." And I'm like, "Yeah, but let's work together." And it's a beautiful process because she respects all the years that we've been working on things. But at the same time, I'm also she's like, "Oh, why don't you try this?" I'm like, "Oh, brilliant." So it's really great to work with a lot of variety of directors on numbers of projects outside of Pokemon as well. Because if you get a really good creative flow, it really becomes a beautiful marriage of creativity.
I imagine that trust is a huge part of that process as well, and like giving into that. Okay, I'm going to go slow, like with the Garganacl. Building up on top of that, because you are also the voice of Brock in those episodes where you were Brock and say Sudowoodo, which I love the fact that you voiced one of his partner Pokemon as well. In the session in the booth, would you swap between doing Brock, or would like one shift a week be like, okay, I'm going to be focusing on Brock's lines today, and then I'll come in for Sudowoodo and Lucario for the following one?
So with those, with any sections where I'm humans, which I haven't done since Brock left, it's mostly been Pokemon. Every once in a while, there's like a, oh no, look out, there's something, blah, 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 blah. There'll be like a random civilian in a crowd or something. But with Brock, when we would do that, is always take care of all the Brock stuff first, because the creature stuff is a lot more grating on the voice. And I do apologize to you if I sound a little froggy. It took 24 hours to get out here. I landed yesterday, and it's I've just been kind of getting over just trying to get my voice back to a good place. But um, but yeah, so we do all the frog stuff first, and then we go back in and do passes and other things. So there would be a lot of times where Brock, it would be Brock and Sudowoodo and Croagunk all in the same scene, and I just take care of all the Brock stuff first, and go back in and do a passive Sudowoodo and then do a passive Croagunk, because Croagunk's the more challenging of the visits. It's pretty easy to do, but is a little more difficult. And so yeah, Brock would get really excited, and then Croagunk would punch him out. So I'd have to basically, I joke around and I say I keep myself up in the booth. So, but yeah, I would do all the Brock lines first, and then go back. Sure.
Because I imagine that would, yeah, that difficulty of changing from one to another to then getting in the headspace, I suppose, of Brock, which is a very interesting place, I can imagine, over the years. Our friend Brock has developed, I think from the nostalgia point of view, I think as someone who watched the anime of seeing Ash go on his journey and Brock leave, but then return, specifically, I have to think that was quite nostalgic for us as viewers. How was it for you returning and being able to return to Brock? I know you played him in the movies and stuff as well, but from the anime point of view.
Well, for me, it's like it was always a thrill when Brock would make an appearance, because it was like, oh, cool, like, okay, cool, we get to bring Brock back into the show. I continuously worked through the show because I was always doing creature work. Yeah, there were whole story arcs where it was like, well, there's no Brock in this, but then Brock will show up for like a 3 episode arc. One of my favorites was when we did the Alolan arc, because actually a good friend of mine, Mark Swint, was the voice of Yahweh, and I knew him when he was just a young aspiring voice actor. He was like, I'm going to be a voice actor one day, and I'm like, keep at it, kid. And he kept at it, and then he was booking things, and then he auditioned for Yahweh. And he booked Yahweh. He's like, I'm Yahweh, and he did that through the Sun and Moon arc, and then Brock showed up, and of all things, Brock gets to challenge Yahweh, and I was like, all right, kid, learn from the master. He's like, all right, old man, you come in and do your victory lap. That's fine. We'll have a battle. And we didn't know how the episode was going to turn out. And so I recorded before him. And when Brock beat Yahweh, I was like, I said to Lisa, I'm like, well, just tell Mark that the old guy still got it. You know? But it was especially fun because Yahweh's always so hot blooded and everything. And we finally got to see like swole Brock, because like Yahweh's always running around shirtless. And he's like, I'm gonna flaming passion. And so then Brock like rips off his shirt as well. And it's that old character model from the original game where he's standing like he's like all buff, and it's like Brock never looked like that in the show, but he finally got the chance to look like a badass. So I really did appreciate that.
What was in the Alola water?
I don't know what's going on. There's a Alola waters. It's a swolola. I don't know.
And continuing on the Brock theme, Brock has many characteristics that are endearing or sometimes can be romantic in nature, one might say. I'm trying to be polite here. But what is one quality that you admire about Brock? Because he has shown that as silly as he can be, for lack of a better phrase, there are some really nice things about him. What do you admire about Brock?
Well, honestly, with my journey with Brock, and I will take a moment to give credit where credit is due. The original voice of Brock, Eric Stewart, did a great job creating the voice of Brock. And when I took over on the show, it was big shoes to fill. But I also feel like I lucked out in the fact that the way the writing of the show went, when he first came onto the show, I felt like he was a lot of comedic beats. There was a lot of they'd be wandering around in the town and Brock would be making food, and then Nurse Joy or Officer Jenny would walk by. Brock would freak out. Misty would carry him away by his ear, and that's the way it went for a while. And then he disappeared for a while, and they replaced him with Tracy, and that didn't go well, I guess, in Japan because they brought him back. And then when I took over, I was like, okay, this is the character. But I feel like, especially with the Diamond and Pearl arc, they did a thing that hadn't been done before. Because Brock is either, hey Ash, let's go on a Pokemon adventure. And then, there's joy, and he gets really excited. But there was the Bishonen Brock, as I like to call him, where like all of a sudden there'll be flowers and pastels in the background, and he suddenly gets very emotional. Nurse Joy, I need to go with you on a Pokemon thing. And I was like, oh, cool, he's got a new level now. Yeah. So they added a new facet to Brock, and it was fun finding that because it was like it should still be a bit comedic, but I wanted it to be schmaltzy and a little romantic, and then also at one point um, with Kenny and Dawn, there was a little thing going on with the two of them, and he became like the big brother character. He's like, if you believe in your heart, follow what you're gonna do. And the man who fails at everything with trying to woo women is giving out advice, but in a very lovingly and older brother way. And also they developed more of the Doc Brock aspect of him, where he was like, I'm gonna go study and become a Pokemon doctor. And so I appreciated that. Like, he became more academic, he became more fatherly, he just became more of a caregiver. And I was really happy because I was like, this character is a great joke. But when you have all those years to work on it and flesh it out, there's just so much more that you can do with it.
Yeah, that depth, I really agree with the doctor aspect, that giving that direction is fun, and yeah, seeing that come out in Alola. So Brock's team, we've already mentioned your Sudowoodo as
Mhm.
well, and voice of that. But apart from Brock's team, we love Brock's team. But what would Bill's Pokemon team look like? Would art mirror reality in the sense? Would you go for any of Brock's team, or are you a fan of different Pokemon that he collected?
Oh, when I do play the Pokemon games, it's a little there's a first of all, people always ask me like, so you're the voices of the games. I'm like, have you played a Pokemon game? Because in the show, if Magnemite shows up, it's and if you hear it again, it's like, and I'm like, no, that's not me. That's an electronic noise. So no, I'm not in the Pokemon games. Those are just electronic beeps and whirs, and like instead of it's like, and I'm like, that's definitely. I mean, I can make that noise, but that wasn't me in the game. That was definitely somebody hitting a button on a synthesizer and like kind of moving the frequencies. So I've not the voices in the game. But the cool thing about it is that whenever I play a Pokemon game, I'm like, well, let me see if I can find my creatures and build a team. And so I always, if I can get my hands on a Chimchar, Monferno, and Ferdinand, like that's a really great play type. And like so, I'll also want to have like a Magnemite or Magneton in my team. Lucario is an amazing fighting type. Croagunk is still great because he's a good poison type. Sudowoodo is very hard to put in your team because you're not really going to get very far with that. But there are enough powerhouse creatures that I can build a team. Well, I have 70 different creatures to choose from. I just have to go out and find them, which was the problem when I was playing Diamond and Pearl. I got to a point where it was like, oh, over by this pond you can find Crogunks, and I was just like, I'm gonna just keep catching Crogunks. And so I would like when I would trade with friends, I called myself Brock in the game. So when I would do a Pokemon trade, they'd be like, "You got Brock's Croagunk." So people really enjoyed that, but I just spent so much time wandering around in that marsh, just capturing as many Croagunks as I could. So it slowed me down a bit.
So, did you get any shiny Croaguns? Did you happen to be shiny Chickadee at that point?
I am not good at finding shinies. Yeah. And I also used to play Pokemon Go for like I played for like the first year or two until like it broke my phone. Like at one point it was just like my phone would overheat while I was playing. I'm like, I gotta stop playing this now. But what I would also do is I would capture creatures. And again, I call myself Brock in that. And you could drop them at local gyms. So you know, go to your local Tesco or something like that, and they have a Pokemon stop. You can put a Pokemon there. So I'd be like, hey, Brock's Krogo is at this gym. And so.
Little do they know.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, who's calling himself Brock?
Yeah. And keeping on the video game thread, we'll shift very quickly before we open it up to some audience questions.
Sure.
But the King of Hyrule as a Legend of Zelda player, what a cool like part to have on your IMDb. What is the process? Is it because you mentioned the process of recording for Pokemon anime at the beginning? Is it different with the video game then, where they do base it off your performance?
with um, with some games, and Legend of Zelda is a series that comes out of Japan. But with some games, we do have to do kind of the dubbing thing. Like when I did Street Fighter, I was the voice of Urien, and it wasn't so much of a matching lip flap. It was like if Urien's throwing an attack and he's shouting an attack, we had to make sure that it's called the waveform is the audio file. We had to make sure that the waveform was exactly the same length, so that when you're like hitting the attack button, it's not going shorter than the attack or going longer. Like it has to be this exact length. So it's a different style of dubbing instead of worrying about lip flap. It's like, does this fit in this space? But with Breath of the Wild, we were given more leeway. Nintendo was really great while they were developing the game. They were very conscious of developing like the US version separate from the Japanese version, and the fact that it's all still the same game, but giving us more leeway of how we're going to dub and how we're going to, you know, change the dialogue and make it fit. And it was really a labor of love because that game took about a year to make. Like every couple months, they'd be like, "Have you back in? We've changed some lines. They've added some scenes." When I worked on it initially, um, there's that famous scene where it's a flashback where the king is berating his daughter to try to push her forward. He was a horrible dad. I'm sorry. He just wanted to save Hyrule. It wasn't like he hated his daughter and loved her. He just didn't want the kingdom to collapse. But in that scene, when we first recorded, we were doing a rough pass of the dialogue, and here's this thing that looks like it's like King Rome made it of like a block of gray clay and gliding across the screen. It's like he's going to be here, and then he's going to talk, and then he's going to walk away. And then when we went in for later, come together and be more and more animated. Um, and so that was neat. So that was more like working on Relay. Um, and it was really wild watching that game develop as it went along. And they were very, very, the Nintendo group wanted to get it right. This was the first time that Zelda game had ever been voiced outside of, you know, like running around going, so we didn't have that anymore. And so that was wild. It was just such an experience. And for me, actually, even auditioning for it, I knew it was a Nintendo project when I read for it, but I was like, oh, so it's a Fire Emblem game because they have Archer, Barbarian, King. I was like, okay, it's just going to be. I didn't know when I was reading for Barbarian that it was Daruk and Archer was Rivali and the King was the King of Hyrule. I was like, this is going to be another RPG. And nothing wrong with the Fire Emblem games. I'd love to be in a Fire Emblem game. I haven't yet, but that's what I thought it was when I first read on it. And we went through a lot of callbacks on that. A callback is when you give the initial audition and then they pare it down to like, well, we have like a dozen people out of the 500 that read on this. We're going to have you guys all come back in this week and read on it, and then we'll pare it down again. And I think I went through like two or three callbacks on that. And at first, they had me do a callback for the Barbarian, but then they were like, we also like the King. And then when they did the next callback, they were like, "We're really focused on the king. We've narrowed it down to three people, and so we did a little bit more with it." And Jamie Mortellaro, who was the director on the game, was just very very insightful with even with the auditions. It was like, let's try this, let's try Jamie's in the studio, and there's two Nintendo reps there, and he's like, hey, these are our Nintendo reps. It's very, yeah, this is Bill. And I was like, hey guys, very nice to meet you. And he's like, so, just wanted to let you know we're working on this. You've got the role of the king. We are doing the first fully voiced Zelda game. And I was just like, okay. Because I was like, okay, there's already been prior Rhythm games, but this is the first fully voiced Zelda game. And as a kid, as I'm older, I played on the NES. I played the Zelda games back in the day on the systems back then, and so it's been a part of my life as well, from my childhood. So I was like, this is this is a big deal. These are big shoes to fill. This is a big job. And so after that, they were like, cool. So we're gonna get you in the booth, and we'll get the engineer to set you all up and everything. I was like, okay. And I walked out, and Jamie walked out. He's like, you all right, buddy? And I'm like, I just need a minute. I need to kind of absorb this. And the funniest thing about it was we did all of that, and then the very first session that we recorded for was there's a show in Los Angeles. They don't do it anymore, but before, like, COVID kind of killed it off. But E3 was the Electronics Entertainment Expo was in Los Angeles every year, and that's where they showcase games. And that year, they were going to show the demo, and it was when they were still developing it as a Wii U game. I think they kind of knew that they were going to also make it like the Switch, but they hadn't announced the Switch yet. But they did have the early demo on Wii U there. And so for that, um, when I went to E3, I was like, I gotta try this. And I waited online for like 2 hours with all the other fans. I'm like, I just want to play the game. Yeah. And I went in and I got to play it. But the amusing thing was is that first day when we recorded for the E3 demo, I go in and they're like, well, this is what we have so far. And they showed, for people who have played Breath of the Wild, that opening with Patricia's lovely opening monologue. She's like, Link, open your eyes, you must save Hyrule. And she's got this beautiful speech to Link. And then when you start the demo, you just see the old man. And every time you walk over to the old man, it's, ah, oh. So my very first session on Breath of the Wild was in the booth for an hour going, okay, jovial laugh. Okay, angry grunt. Surprise, oh. And so for the first hour, after being told, you're going to be in this massive franchise, my first hour was, ah, ah, so when I went and played the demo, I was with my roommate at the time, who was with me at E3, and he's a huge Zelda fan. And I'm sitting there we're at the two Wii U stations, and I'm like looking over to see like his reactions. He's meeting the old man. It's like, well, you must get the paraglider, but you've got to go through these shrines. And I'm like, pretty cool, huh? And he's like, oh yeah, this is great. I'm like, he has no idea.
Yeah, I was like, hey, did you sign an NDA?
I signed an NDA so I couldn't say anything. He couldn't figure it out because it was all just And of course now, because he's such a huge Zelda fan, he's pre-ordered the Switch, and the game is coming in. And when the game comes out, we're allowed to announce. So I was like, well, I don't want to like blindside the poor bastard, because on top of everything else, he ordered from Best Buy, and they were like, sorry, you were supposed to have it to you for Friday, but you're not getting it until Monday. No. And he's like, man, I really want to play Zelda. And so I, that day when the game came out, I was like, I'm knocking at the door. And he's like, hey, what's up? I'm like, hey, I'm sorry that your Switch isn't coming until Monday. Just so you know, before you find out at the internet, I'm the king. And he looks at me like I've got 5 heads. He's like, what is wrong with you? What do you mean? I'm like, no, I'm the voice of the king of Hyrule. And he's like, shut up! Get out of here! How is that possible? I'm like, because I'm very good at keeping a deal.
Yeah.
So you didn't know, but I didn't want you to go online and be like,
You didn't say anything.
the
Yeah.
hell? So I was like, I wanted to tell you first. So yeah, and then he finally got the game. I didn't get a Switch till like a year later, because one of the great perks of being a voice actor is that you're always broke. So it's not as glamorous as it seems, but yeah. So I watched him play the first time, and I was like, all right, I got my Switch, and for the longest time, it was the only game I got on the Switch. I have more now, but it took me a little while. But yeah, I was like, all right, I'm gonna play through this, and yeah, and that's good.
Oh my gosh, amazing. Thank you so much, Phil.
Absolutely.
I don't know how much time we have before Mary. I didn't see if Mary
I don't know. Barry's like, screw it. I'm gonna go have waffles. I don't know.
Do you guys have any questions for Phil?
So I understand you voiced Lucario through the whole Pokemon series. Do you voice the Lucario in the Pokemon film?
In the Pokemon film. Okay, so what happened was that the Pokemon film came out right as we were in the transition. So you'll probably hear, especially if you look online, that Sean Schimmel, who's the voice of Goku, was the psychic Lucario in the Mystery of Mew. When we went through the studio transition, that movie already had come out, but then Smash Brothers for the Wii came out, and they were like, "Hey, can you sound like this?" And I said, "Sure." So I ended up being Lucario in Smash Brothers on the Wii, and then Lucario started showing up in the show, and they were like, "Oh, there's Lucario. Hey, there's another Lucario. Hey, Ash has a Lucario." And so from that point forward, I was Lucario. And then Toshi's gonna hate me for this. Toshi Fumiyoshi is the producer of Pokemon USA, and I always give him a rough time about this. I've gotten over it; it's not a problem. But I did it in Smash Brothers for the Wii, and then when Smash Brothers came out for the Wii U, I was still in New York because Pokemon initially recorded in New York. Now they're recorded in New York and LA. But Smash Brothers, in general, records 90% of their stuff in Los Angeles. And then every once in a while they fly out and they'll set up in a studio and they're like, we need to get Pokemon people to do their voices for the game. But when they were in LA recording, at one point they were talking to Sean Schimmel, and Sean's like, "Oh, I'm the voice of Lucario," and they were like, "Oh, well then get in the booth," and he did it. And I had been in the Wii version, and I was like, "Well, any day now they're gonna call me because I know they're making it for the Wii U." And then the game got announced, and they started releasing materials for it, and I called up Toshi, and I said, "Hey, what's going on with Lucario?" He's like, "What? What do you mean, Lucario? We got that already recorded." Sean came in and recorded months ago. I was like, "You are aware that I've been voicing Lucario for like the last, I don't know, at that point, like 5 years." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, well, I mean, I know he was in the movie." And it's that, oh, like, okay, but I was also Lucario in the Wii version, which was also that. It's fine. So yes, I share Lucario with Sean. So if you see like Funko Pops that are signed by both of us online, don't be alarmed. There are two Lucarios out there. But then again, there's also multiple Gokus, so anything's possible. But yeah, with the exception of Mystery of Mew and the Wii Smash Brothers, the Wii U Smash Brothers, you can hear me as Lucario. So, yes.
What's your favorite line of Brock?
My favorite line is Brock. Again, I apologize because I'm a little hoarse today. Let me see if I can do it. So the thing is that normally when Ash is working, when Brock is training with Ash, he'll just be in a normal speaking tone like this. But then if Nurse Joy or Officer Jenny shows up, "Nurse Joy, Officer Jenny, I can't decide," and it sounds really bad right now because it sounds like Brock has bronchitis. But I do promise it's because travel has destroyed my voice. Which is why you'll also see on the little form with autographs. It's like, we're not doing voices, can't do voices, Bill can't speak. But that's the best I could do. I'm sorry, sir.
And lastly, are you Team Nurse Joy?
Mary, don't run away.
No, we're
Okay.
Team Nurse Joy or Team Officer Jenny? Hard-hitting question.
Nurse Joy, Officer Jenny. I can't. Hey! Thank you, everybody.